All right, thank you so much, guys, for coming. So today we're doing the lymphatic system, really, and we'll talk about the vessels that are involved, and we'll talk about the organs that are also involved in the lymphatic system. So since today we kind of had the scheduling problem, we don't really have any data from the advanced smart module, which is fine. So that will be due tomorrow. Okay, guys? So the lymphatic system, in fact, the vessels are similar to veins in terms of how they are, the valves, and how the lymph moves in the lymphatic vessels, because this is not under the direct influence of the heart, you know, for the pressure to move the fluid in the vessels. So, you know, we have the same skeletal muscles involved, and we have the same respiratory movements involved in moving lymph in the lymphatic vessels. Okay, so the lymphatic system is similar to the venous circulation, really, and of course there's like two kind of sort of semi-dependent parts of this lymphatic system. You get the lymphoid tissue, and then you get the organs, you know, bound by a connective tissue membrane, such as the spleen, you know, and lymph nodes. Okay, so, and then the network of vessels I was talking about, that is almost like the venous system. Okay, so those two, they're kind of interdependent. Some of the cells mature in these lymphoid tissues, these organs, like the thymus, for instance. We find that the T cells, which are white blood cells, mature in the thymus. That's why they're called T cells. All right, so the lymphatic system is also involved in, as well as collecting fluid from the tissues. What else is the lymphatic system involved in, really? Immunity, yeah, because I just talked about those T cells, right? So the lymphatic system really, after skin being the first line of defense, if anything enters the systemic circulation or the body fluids, let me say, the lymphatic system, as it collects all these body fluids, it will filter through before it deposits those fluids back into the blood. And by then, if there are any microorganisms, it will you know, activate the immune system to attack. So we got these two systems, of course, the network of blood vessels, we got the lymphoid tissue, okay, with you know, lymphoid organs scattered all over the place. You know, some of it is diffuse. That means it doesn't have a real boundary, a real like connective tissue covering. Okay, so it's called diffuse lymphatic tissue, like the tonsils, something similar to that. And then, but the real organs would be the spleen, the thymus, with the real, you know, and the lymph nodes as well. The lymph nodes, there's about 450. They have an actual connective tissue surrounding them. Okay, okay, and the lymphatic nodules is part of the diffuse. You know, throughout the body, you have about 450 lymph nodes. Some of them are superficial, so that when they filter, you can actually see them swelling. Some of them are deep. The rest of them are deep.
These ones are here.
Yeah, so the superficial ones will be some in the cervical. You know, back when HIV first started, one of the characteristic things you see about them, apart from them being very skinny, you see the enlarged cervical lymph nodes. Then there's also axillary lymph nodes that are superficial and growing. You know, the inguinal are superficial. All right. So the functions, basic functions of the lymphatic system is to return fluids back to the you know, circulation, back to the vascular system, and also proteins that you know, escape the capillaries. There are also smaller proteins that can go through the pores of the capillaries, are returned to blood via the lymphatic system. And once the fluid, this interstitial fluid, has entered a lymphatic vessel or lymphatic capillaries, it is now lymph. Okay, but it's the same extracellular fluid. There's nothing different about it. The only thing different about it is that it's now located in a lymphatic vessel. Once that happens, it's now lymph. But it's the same fluid. Okay? So that's why the interstitial, once it enters, that you know, lymphatic vessel is not lymph. All right, so good. So the functions of it, we talked about it a little bit in the intro. Retaining fluids to prevent edema, all right? So retains about 3 liters a day. You retain of fluids, of interstitial fluid, is retained to the vascular circulation, okay? So the 3 liters is a sizable volume. And also, the lymphatic system, we will do that when we do digestion. It's involved in fat absorption. So what happens is when fat is absorbed, it is first broken down into the fatty acids and glycerol, and then that's absorbed into the cell. And then the smooth endoplasmic reticulum, like we said in the functions of, I think that's in AMP1 when we're talking about the functions of the smooth endoplasmic reticulum, it is reassembled back into the fat again. Okay, the glycerol and the fatty acids are reassembled, and then after that, they are attached to proteins. You know, why would we attach the fats to proteins? Because fats are what? Fats are, lipids, which means they don't mix with what? Water. So, because the cell is an aqueous environment, so you have to take a protein to them to make them soluble. Okay, so when you do that, they form this sort of milky, whitish fluid called chyle. That then, and they're called it's called chyle, and that because of that milky appearance, it will enter the lymphatic capillaries called lacteals from the milky appearance. So the small intestine is lined with these lymphatic capillaries, which will take up the fat, now mixed with protein, looking like a milky substance. So that's why. That's how the lymphatic system is involved in fat absorption, and then transport the fat into the blood system. Okay, so that's what they're called lacteals, because once you mix the fat, once you take a protein to the fat, it looks like a milky sort of fluid. Okay, so those lymphatic capillaries that pick it up are called lacteals because of that. Lactose from milk, right? So it's involved in fat absorption and transport of fats to the blood, right? And then, of course, we said it's involved in the immune system. Okay. So the milky fluid is fat plus the protein. PTN is a shortcut for protein. So that's why it's called the lacteals. Those are lymphatic capillaries. Okay, so it defends against the microorganisms, because in the lymph nodes we have T and B cells in there, and we'll talk about how T cells are, they originate in bone, in the red bone marrow, but they're called T cells. These are lymphocytes, white blood cells. They will mature in the thymus, which is one of the lymphatic organs. And the B cells also originate from red bone marrow, but they do what now? They, mature in bone, so that's what we call B cells. Okay, so these cells, once they mature, the ones in the bone and the ones in the thymus, they will go and sit and wait in lymph nodes. Right, so that when the fluid is passing through, it is filtered and those lymphocytes are ready to attack. And once there's bacteria or any foreign microorganisms, then it will, the lymphatic system will activate the immune system, which is the job of actually killing all these microorganisms, right? So defend against, just be able to explain these functions and tell me about them. Okay, thank you so much. And tell me about these functions of the lymphatic system, right? All right, very good. All right, excellent. Yeah. All right, so lymphatic vessels. All right, so the lymphatic vessels are really blind-ended tubes that start off as lymphatic capillaries. Blind-ended, they kind of end. They start like that, okay, and then they just unite and then form vessels, which have the valves, and then going up. And they're a one-way system. The valves, just like we have valves in veins, they ensure that the lymph moves one way. So that's the one-way system, okay? And then, of course, all the fluid is dumped into the subclavian vein, okay? Subclavian vein then connects to the vena cava, and then it goes back into the heart. So there's a major collecting duct, the right lymphatic duct, which kind of collects the right side, the upper quadrant, you know, with half of the head on the right side and the other half of the torso on the right side. Then the rest of it is collected by the thoracic duct, okay, and then dumped into the. And I'll show you a picture very soon. So it flows back to the heart and goes to the subclavian. Okay, subclavian vein. So lymphatic vessels, of course, are microscopic. They're small. They're permeable. They're blind-ended, like I was saying, capillaries, and they then join to lymphatic vessels, which are bigger. Okay, just like the venules lead to the, small veins and large veins and so forth. Same thing. Okay, this starts as lymphatic capillaries, goes to the lymphatic vessels. Then the lymphatic vessels go to the collecting ducts, which then dump into the subclavian. Right? You see what I'm saying? So that's how they get larger in size. Okay, and then we will talk about the two collecting ducts very soon. Okay, the blind-ended tube. You must be wondering, how does fluid get into it if it's ended like this? It's not open up. Okay, so and I'll show you a picture in a little bit. The cells are kind of arranged like this. Okay, okay. They kind of overlap. You know what I'm saying? So there's the cells, something like that. Okay, so this is nucleus. So when interstitial fluid is accumulating here, and I'm going to use blue for the fluid, right? It's accumulating here. It's going to have what? It's going to increase the hydrostatic pressure. Yeah, right? And that hydrostatic pressure is going to push upon the cells. These cells, they're not, attached by tight junctions like we talked about earlier in the NP1. They're overlapped like this. So that when the pressure is high, okay, it's just going to be pushed like that. So this cell will be pushed, and this cell is already been pushed. You see what I'm saying? And then fluid enters. Okay? Fluid enters once this, because of those openings. Once the fluid has entered the lymphatic capillary, what's going to happen to the pressure in here? It's going to build up. The pressure here is going to go up until it is going to now be larger than the pressure on the hydrostatic pressure on the outside. Then what? Then the hydrostatic pressure inside will push this up close. And then that's it. That's how the fluid enters. Just depends on which side there's more pressure. When fluid accumulates in the interstitial spaces, it will push those valves, those cells open, fluid gets in, and then once there's a bunch of fluid in there, it's going to have a high hydrostatic pressure, and then it's going to push it shut, and then because of the valves that are located just like in the veins, and because of muscular contraction, because we're going to talk about this later on, is the same forces that move blood in veins, is the same that's going to move fluid, lymph, in the lymphatic vessels. And then those valves will ensure the unidirectional flow of lymph. You see what I'm saying? Muscles contract, and then they push this. Also, the characteristics of lymphatic vessels is the same with the connective tissue on the outside, the muscular layer, and kind of like the endothelium lining on the inside. And so the smooth muscle of the actual vessels can also contract, causing the fluid to move up. And the valves, of course, will ensure unidirectional flow. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So you got the lymphatic capillaries, this is how it goes, right? And then the lymphatic vessels, right? And then lymphatic ducts. And then the collecting ducts are the largest of them all, the right lymphatic duct and the thoracic duct. It's kind of funny the way it's divided up. Kind of like the top quadrant and half of the right side of the head is collected by the right lymphatic duct. The rest of the body is collected by the thoracic duct. So That's just what it is. And the thoracic duct is really huge. It starts from the small intestine, where it will be picking up all the fats after they digested it, goes up, and then it picks from fluids from all left side, left side, half of the head. Okay, so that's how they go up inside, and it's just like the venous system, really. Okay, so there's going to be two kinds of these lymph nodes, right? There's ones that are superficial. Oh my God, my period. Don't write something. It's that Friday, you know, they did something. Okay, superficial lymph nodes, LN lymph nodes, okay, will include the cervical ones, okay, these ones right here. So those are the ones that when they start swelling, you can see them because they are superficial. They are kind of sort of, you know, just in the subcutaneous tissue, okay. They're in the subcutaneous tissue, so when they swell, you see it, okay. Isn't it nice that you can use this thing? And then the axillary ones. Axillary is which part of the body? Your armpit. Have you noticed if you get hurt somewhere, you get one of your lymph nodes, because when it's draining all that, like maybe your big toe is hurt or something, and then you step on something, and you get, sometimes you see you're growing, or if you have something here on your thigh or something, you know, close to that area, sometimes you can definitely see the lymph nodes kind of acting up.
I got a good story.
Yeah.
I had a enlarged inguinal lymph node, and I thought for sure it was a hernia or something.
Or something, yeah, that really scares the crap out of you. Yeah, know what you mean.
And you know, you got this massive lump in your groin, and I went to the doctor and he said, "Well, let me check your feet."
Yeah, see,
I had a really bad case of athlete's foot at that point.
Yeah, so that means the lymph nodes are really draining all that gunk, you know, the fungus or whatever it is. You know what I'm saying? Because it can become systemic.
Gross story, but yeah, pretty.
Yeah, I know. Thank you for that. That's what happens. You know, that's why I wanted to point that out. Because you know, sometimes you get here somewhere and you see that lymph node. That's why, you know, with the AIDS guys, the cervical ones, it happens. You know, they are the ones you can see. The other ones will be also, you know, because the HIV systemic, it's all over the place. It's only the cervical ones we can see because they don't cover the neck, unless if you're wearing a real big, you know, turtleneck. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? So we see them, but the other ones would also be affected. But you know, and the difference with the HIV ones is that when you get hurt, only a particular, you know, lymph node, you know, superficial lymph node will, you know, increase the size. Like you press your toe, so your inguinal did it. Okay, if it was an HIV situation, because it's systemic, all of them would go. You see? Okay, so the axillary ones, and then of course, these are the inguinal ones. But the superficial, the rest of them are deep. Okay, so one will get the superficial, and then the other ones are deep. The rest of the lymph nodes are deep. You don't see them, you know. Okay, so sometimes I ask about the superficial lymph nodes, and you should kind of know it, just knowing your own body generally, you know. That's the armpit one, the cervical, and then you just use the language, axillary and cervical, and you know, inguinal. Okay.
So the lymph nodes that swell right here, are those considered part of the cervical lymph nodes?
Yeah, the cervical lymph nodes. The tonsils are also in the throat area. In fact, they guard, they fall under the diffuse tissue because they don't have definite, you know, connective tissue, you know, covering them. They kind of look diffuse, so they kind of blend in with the rest of the tissues. But you do see the lymph nodules that make it up. And later on, we'll talk about the diffuse lymph nodes in the small intestine, especially as you approach the appendix in the latter half of the small intestine, which will include mostly the ileum. Okay, you have pious patches over there. Okay, ileum with a U and an E, not an I. That will be the bone in the curve again. Okay, so so you will see this diffuse lymphatic tissue spread out strategically where there might be bugs. So, the bugs coming from the appendix, you don't want it to invade your system, so you have got diffuse lymphatic tissue there, okay? And so forth and so forth, all right? And then the tonsils are the same way, because you eat stuff, and it's sort of like the guards guarding the entry into the respiratory system, entry into the digestive. All right. So there's the lymphatic system right there with the lymphatic vessels and the lymph nodes. Like I say again, there's about 450 lymph nodes throughout the body. That's a lot of lymph nodes. So anyway, lymphatic capillaries, like I said, just like veins, venules, and so forth. Similar to blood capillaries with modifications. They're very permeable. Okay. Blood capillaries, they have little gaps on them. Okay, and they can, small little proteins can get out, okay, only except the capillaries in the liver. Those ones have really huge gaps and they're called sinusoids because of that. Because the liver, what does it do? It filters the blood and it detoxifies, so everything has to come out of the blood and then it's all filtered out before it goes back into the vena cava and then recirculated. Okay, so apart from that, for the most part, the regular blood capillaries in the vascular system are not as permeable. But these ones are very permeable for that reason I told you. The way the fluid enters those blind-ended tubes. So it's got to be very permeable. Excuse me. It's because of the arrangement of the endothelial lining. The cells don't actually, touch. They just overlap a little bit. They're not still together. So very permeable, loosely joined endothelial mini valves, okay, withstand interstitial pressure and remain open, okay. So and it's just a law of physics here. Where the hydrostatic pressure is greatest, it will push open the valves to lead in that direction, right? And then once the hydrostatic pressure builds up inside, it will push them shut, okay? So that it is not going to enter and exit again. So those are the lymphatic capillaries, and then they form the larger ones, the lymphatic vessels. Sometimes in an exam, I'll list them, lymphatic capillary, lymphatic vessel, lymphatic duct, and then you can arrange them in their order. So, and that's an easy name. So lymphatic vessels and valves, like I said, just like the veins do. So that this will ensure that lymph is going to flow in one direction only. And it's not going to go back, right? So, and again, like I said, contraction of skeletal muscle is going to move lymph, all right? Respiratory movements, expansion and contraction of the thoracic cavity kind of has that suction, like a syringe thing deal, you know what I'm saying? That will move lymph up, okay? And also, the smooth muscle in the lymphatic vessels itself. See what I'm saying? So this is just like the veins, no difference. Except now we're just talking lymphatic vessels, that's all. So you're not learning anything new here. We're just applying it to the lymphatic system, that's it. Okay? So gotta know, of course, the way, the characteristics of lymphatic capillaries, lymphatic vessels. Of course, the way the lymph is moved, okay, in the lymphatic vessels, all right? And you see here the tissues of the body, and you can see the capillaries and, the venules and whatnot, and then all these blind-ended lymphatic vessels, lymphatic capillaries. They go everywhere to collect interstitial fluid to prevent edema. And then they go ahead and filter that so that they don't just dump it dirty back into the circulatory system, you know what I'm saying? So that's why you have those white blood cells, B cells, T cells waiting in the lymph nodes to filter all this stuff before you put it back. You know what I'm saying? You clean it up. It's just like the sewage water when, that you flush and you do all those things with, it gets cleaned up again, and then, if it goes into the river, and it's flowing, it actually cleans it up, and all the activity going on in the microorganism, it cleans all up, by the time it goes to the other end of the stream, it's all clean water, you know, and we use it again. You know. So that's what happens. So same thing with this. It's kind of like, so like I was saying, the top right side, you see this quadrant here, and the half of the head, all that is collected by the right lymphatic duct. Okay? That's just the way it is, guys. I'm not sure why that is. It doesn't sort of make sense, but the rest of the body is collected by the thoracic duct. Okay. So the thoracic duct kind of starts here with the System-Fri, which is like a chyli from the chyle, that is a mixture of fat and lymph. Okay, with the proteins. Okay, so that makes that chyle here. There's like it's like an extension. It's like because the small intestine are located here, and the small intestine are absorbing the fats. So, and then the thoracic duct goes up like that, and then jumps into the subclavian. All right. So that's just the way it is. The right lymphatic duct and the thoracic duct, which collects the rest of the body. Just how it's set up. Okay. So, of course, gotta know these two major ducts, collecting ducts in the lymphatic system, and what part of the body they drain. And that's it, right? Right lymphatic duct, the upper right half, okay, including the upper right half of the torso and half of the head on the right side. You can see the thoracic duct here. It starts, you see, it goes up here, through the thoracic cavity, starts as the System-Fri over there. You see this enlargement here. I think it's highlighted on the next. See, there is the System-Fri, named after chyle. Okay, because that's where all the lymphatic capillaries or lymphatic vessels from the small intestine will converge. So that's why it's kind of enlarged, so that it gets all the fluid. It's like a big intersection, if you will. So you have the System-Fri on the thoracic duct. In the abdominal cavity, you see, this is what is this?
Diaphragm.
Diaphragm.
Can you go back one slide?
Sure. You see, I like these pictures because they're actual cadavers, you know what I'm saying? These are actual
well, I like where they highlight what you're looking at.
Exactly, that's exactly why I like them. And it's in relation to whatever else is left on that section.
Are these the same pictures in the lab book?
Yeah, and that's why I like this new book with the lab manual. It's got actual photos of cadavers.
The lab book.
The lab book. Of course, the lab book has got pictures of what I like about it, especially for the cat dissection for the muscular system. It's got actual cadavers of human beings. Then it's got actual dissections of the cats, because we're using the cat to study the human being. The other one didn't have that. It only had pictures of the cats, but you're studying human, natural. Yeah, cats are cheaper. So this is where you can translate from the cat to the actual human being. So that picture's got
Central has human cadavers in their lab.
Yeah, I mean, Central is a bigger school.
Their classes are cheaper too.
I know, because it's a state school, We are kind of like a private school. We're trying our best. We will be, I think when we can attract students from outside, we'll be able to kind of lower everything down a little bit, the tuition.
Look at all this one-on-one time you get with your...
What's that?
But look at all this one-on-one time.
Yeah, you get better though, because we get small classes. Those classes there are very big.
Not all of them are small.
Not all of them are small.
AMP2 last semester was huge.
It was humongous. This time we kind of had a different class of people because we used to take all comers sort of. Now we kind of have more the traditional students coming from high school than before. We turned away almost 100 students or so, 60 maybe, So that's why. That's why the classes are smaller this year. But eventually, it's going to build up again. So we are deliberately doing that. We're not just taking people, having them waste their money when they're not really ready to come to, what I'm saying? So, anyway, so that's the deal. So this is the thoracic duct, and you get to see some of the major blood vessels here. You see this subclavian right here? You see that? So that's the good part. And then you see the diaphragm and whatnot. And then the same deal here. And then this is highlighting the System-Fri at the bottom there. Because it's like a major intersection, carrying a whole bunch of this lymph because the small intestine is absorbing a whole bunch of fat here, and it's mixed with the protein, and it mixed this milky fluid called chyle. So that's why it's called the cisterna chyli at the bottom there. Okay, so lymphatic tissue now, especially in the organs, how you have reticular fibers, connective tissue, that kind of sort of, gives structure to soft organs like the spleen, the thymus, so that it can sort of sit up. Otherwise, it won't have the structure. It's kind of like the skeleton of these organs, because what the job is to filter. If it's crumpled up on itself because it's not held up, it's not going to filter properly. So you have these reticular fibers, which are all over the place. Connective tissue, and this, in it will be the lymphocytes, placed in there to filter and wait. Okay, so this reticular connective tissue holds the tissue up so that it can do the filtration job. Okay, and we'll talk about the splenic cords later on, which are pretty much reticular cells with reticular fibers in them. Okay, and that's where the spleen will be filtering blood. In fact, the spleen is the only organ of the lymphatic system that doesn't filter lymph, it filters whole blood. And it has a bit of storage of blood as well. It stores a little bit of minor function. So the lymphatic tissue, which I said could be diffuse, so they were kind of blends in with the tissues, or it could be surrounded by a connective tissue capsule. So like lymph nodes, which we said there's 450 in the body, the spleen, and the thymus. The thymus actually changes size. It starts off very big when you're young because you're still naive and you're still trying to get introduced to all these bugs so that you build immunity with it. So it's very big, almost takes most of the thoracic cavity when you're young as an infant, and then as you get older, it atrophies and reduces in size until it starts getting replaced by fat when you get older. Okay, and so forth. So we'll talk about each of these organs later on. So non-encapsulated lymphatic tissue is diffuse because it kind of sort of blends with the surrounding tissues. All right, and then lymphatic nodules make that up, and tonsils are the same way too. Tonsils are diffuse lymphatic tissue. All right. So you know the two types of lymphatic tissue or lymphoid tissue. You got this diffuse type, and then you got the ones that are actual organs surrounded by a capsule, a connective tissue capsule. All right. And then so this diffuse lymphatic tissue has all these lymphocytes in it, to wait for any invading microorganisms. Okay. So there will be the B lymphocytes and the T lymphocytes. T lymphocytes and B lymphocytes are normally called B cells and T cells. Okay? Because one matures in bone, the other matures in thymus. Exactly. Okay? So the diffuse has no boundaries. All right? So lymphatic nodules, they're just aggregates of them, and they kind of make a circular kind of sort of nodule. Like the Peyer's patches, are located in the latter half of the small intestine. So the latter half of small intestine, and then also on the appendix. You know how the ileum joins the colon, ascending colon, and right there is the appendix. And what is appendix? It's pretty much filled with microorganisms. What does it do, the appendix? It just makes sure the gut microflora is able to, and it keeps inoculating the gut, microflora. But sometimes it gets inflamed or blocked by a hard piece of fecal matter, and then it's me. I should have put some vibrate. Yeah, I know. When it gets blocked, the microbes will proliferate, and then it starts to increase in size, and it's painful. And you want to get it taken out before it does what? Because if it bursts, it would be like a bad systemic infection because all the bugs will go, and that's really bad. You don't want that. Because that would be one hell of a mess to clean up. Okay, so you have Pliers patches right there, you know what I'm saying, so that they don't invade the circulatory system, they don't breach that, appendix. So you have lymphoid tissue spread out strategically throughout the body. It's not just there, you know what I'm saying? It's like the tonsils are also a good strategic way to prevent entry into the respiratory system. Any system that opens to the outside has got this lymphoid tissue, you know what I'm saying? Guarding those areas, you know what I'm saying? And we'll talk a little bit more about plastics. Now this is just blood showing the red blood cells and the lymphocytes, the B cells and the T cells. You see how the nucleus is so big? On that, lymphocytes have a thin rim of cytoplasm. It's mostly nucleus, but that's just the way they have the cells. See how big the nucleus? The whole cell is almost all nucleus. Those are lymphocytes, originating in red bone marrow. So Paya patches. Paya patches, these are located in the latter half of the lymphoid tissue, diffuse lymphoid tissue of the small intestine, and it goes over the appendix as well. All right. And they're similar to the tonsils. The tonsils are located in the pharynx, in the throat, and there are three types: palatine ones, sublingual or lingual ones, right under the tongue, and then to the posterior of the neck, the pharyngeal ones. Okay, so it kind of guides entry into the digestive and respiratory systems. Okay, so it's found in the latter half, the distal half of the small intestine, and it's the small intestine that's continuous with the colon, and right there at the junction of the ileocecal junction where you have the appendix, and the appendix is also covered with the Paya patches. Okay, and the appendix more so because the appendix is actually breeding bugs, microorganisms that are populating your gut microflora. Okay. They ensure that your gut has got enough microorganisms to do the job, especially in the colon, right? Because that's where you have the bugs digesting the rest of the stuff. And you get a bit of benefit from it, and the bugs get the food, because the cellulose you can't digest anyway. Okay? Paya patches, of course, destroy bacteria and prevent them breaching the intestinal wall and getting into the systemic circulation, which will be really bad. Okay? They also generate memory, so that the next time you have any bug of the same kind, for long-term immunity, you launch a swift attack. Okay, so they do that. So functions of Paya patches, of course, that's preventing breach of the intestinal wall, and then of course creating memory, so that the next time you get the same bug, it's going to launch a swift attack. This is a diffuse lymph nodule. You can see how it kind of sort of blends with the tissues, but you can see kind of like an outline of it, and then you have these nodules in it. You know what I'm saying? So you have a little bit of outline of it, but it's diffuse because of that. It doesn't have a definite connective tissue covering. Like the tonsils are the same way, Paya patches are the same way. All right? All right, so lymphatic organs, these are the ones. Tonsils are not quite covered by, they are diffuse as well. Okay, so we're kind of making our way up to the big boys, the ones that are covered by a connective tissue membrane. So this is the simplest lymphoid organs. We're kind of becoming organs now, okay? But they're still not covered by a definite connective tissue, the lymphatic. But they are the simplest sort of lymphoid organs. You know what I'm saying? Tonsils are. Okay, and form a ring of lymphatic tissue, of course, around the pharynx, like we said, and the palatine ones, the sublingual ones, and the pharyngeal ones on the posterior upper neck. So you got the palatine ones, the lingual ones, and the pharyngeal tonsils. Okay, kind of sort of covering the nasopharynx towards the back. Okay, so and so sometimes when you're young, your tissue, your lymphoid, your tonsils also decrease in size, and sometimes they may disappear as you get older too. That's why if you're young and they're acting up, they could remove them, Although nowadays they don't really do that, they don't recommend it as a treatment, you know what I'm saying? Because it can cause other problems with it when they do that. So now they're not quick to just take the knife and cut. You know what I'm
Still have
saying?
yours?
I still have mine.
I still have
Mine never acted up. You know, me I got lucky. You know, they never acted up. And the only thing I got was sort of colds and flus. I don't know why, for some reason when I was young. After that, that's it. Never got sick. Okay. So epithelial tissue overlying this tarsal masses in vaginates, you know, it forms crypts. You know, like like that. And then, you know, forms these crypts. So this is the lymphatic tissue, right? You know what I'm saying? And these crypts, number one, they kind of sort of increase the surface area too, you know what I'm saying? And they also trap bacteria and destroy it. As you swallow things and stuff like that. So they kind of
Some
trap.
people have bad breath.
Yeah.
It's gross.
It's gross. And one of the things that leads to bad breath, the medical term for bad breath is halitosis. Yeah, bad breath is really bad. It's because the saliva is also not circulating. So if you're nervous or if you're scared, and your mouth is dry, or you have dry mouth, you know, and that can also cause your teeth to rot. Because when you have dry mouth, you're not circulating and you're not moving all those, and the bugs are settled. They set up camp, you get a cavities. Okay, so these invaginations are called blind-ended crypts, and they trap the bacteria and destroy it. All right, so the crypts trap bacteria and particulate matter, you know, anything like that, and then you kind of sort of get rid of it. And also, at the same time, this increases surface area too. You know what I'm saying? Surface area. Because of the crypts, you know, they make more surface area, and you can monitor more of the material entering the throat, right? Make sense? So know about these invaginations called crypts that increase surface area and also trap particulate matter and trap bacteria so that it can be dealt with. That's the tonsils. So it's simplest, and there's those three: palatine, lingual, and pharyngeal. Right? Okay, the pharyngeal are kind of sort of on the top of the nasopharynx up here. The palatine ones down here on the side. So these are them. The palatine you see right here, and then the pharyngeal one up on the top, kind of sort of guarding the nasopharynx as well. And then under the tongue here, you got the lingual ones. You know what I'm saying? Right at the base of the tongue. So those are there. Alright, then this is the next diagram showing you the pharyngeal, the palatine, and the ones at the base of the tongue, the lingual ones. Okay? So good. So lymph nodes. Now these are the smaller of these lymph organs, and but there's many of them. It's about 450, like I was saying, throughout the body. 450 lymph nodes. Okay, so they form the principal lymph organs, right?
What was that? You just 450?
Yeah, throughout the body. Did you see that?
Okay.
Yeah, there's 450 of them, lymph nodes, spread throughout.
It's a lot.
That's a lot. I was saying earlier on, there's a bunch of lymph nodes, you know what I'm saying? And they are full of these B and T cells, waiting and guarding all the lymph. So throughout the lymphatic vessels, you will have a lymph node, and lymphatic vessel, and they'll be filtering as the lymph is pushed up to the subclavian before it enters. So by the time the lymph enters the subclavian, it has passed through a whole bunch of lymph nodes. Nothing's going to escape, you know what I'm saying? You don't want to dump dirty fluid back into the blood. No, so you want to clean it up first before you put it back into circulation. All right. So you know it's embedded connective tissue. You know that is clustered along the lymphatic vessels. Like I'm saying, as it goes up, you have lymphatic nodes, lymph nodes, vessel, lymph node, vessel, lymph node, vessel. Okay, so that's how it is. And so we talked about this, the ones that we call superficial, right? The ones that we call superficial lymph nodes, we said they're in the axillary region, in the armpit area, they're in the cervical region, which is the neck area, and they're also in the inguinal or the groin area, right? And the rest of them are deep, okay? and you don't get to see those. The rest of the lymph nodes are deep. And, so two basic functions, of course, filtration. Those waiting lymphocytes will take care of any invading microorganisms. You know, and they have macrophages in there too. Macrophages are the major phagocytes of the body. All right. So all those immune cells are kind of waiting in there. Plus, they will activate the immune system. Once they get all excited, those B cells and T cells, and they get all activated, they will activate the big guns, you know, called the tanks, to come in. So they will activate the immune system. Okay, so two functions of lymph nodes, you know, and then the overall functions of the lymphatic system. Okay, so kind of keep that in track, you know, the lymphatic system as a whole, then the different organs, the diffuse lymphatic tissues, and so forth and so forth. Okay, so these are filtration, and then of course for microorganisms, and then activation of the immune system. All right, and especially B cells are called antigen-presenting cells, APCs. Why? Because they will literally present the antigen to the killer T cells. Let's say here, kill it. So that when the killer T cells see it anyway, any antigen that is foreign, boom, it's attacked. So B cells, which are the B lymphocytes, they are also called antigen-presenting cells. And also dendritic cells, which are part of the lymphatic system, they are antigen-presenting cells. That means they'll go and activate, they'll present the antigens to the killer T cells, and they get taken care of right there. Okay, so and these just pictures, I like to show these pictures because you can see the actual cadaver dissected, and then you can see the highlighted mediastinal nodes, and then the inguinal lymph nodes, and so forth. Okay, and the iliac ones, you know, kind of up here a little bit towards the abdominal cavity, more right above the pelvic cavity. Inguinal ones are right in the pelvic cavity, right? Okay, and then of course the armpit ones. And this one shows you the armpit ones. I think this is a female and that's a male over there. Okay, the female under the breast, they have also the pectoral muscles too. You know.
Could be a man boob.
What's that?
Some men have
Could be a man boob.
Man boob. Yeah, men boobs too. There, people are taking estrogens and stuff. They grow on them. Or if you abuse steroids, you get gynecomastia, which is growth of your breast. You get like, you know. Anyway, so this is a lymph node. Okay, and the lymph node, what it has is got two distinct regions: the cortex, which is the outside layer, and then the medulla on the inside. Just like all the rest of the other organs, like the adrenal glands, they get the cortex on the outside, and the medulla on the inside. The kidneys, same thing, cortex on the outside, medulla on the inside. But we do that when we do the you know, urinary system and so forth and so forth. But it's the same deal here. You get the connective tissue covering on the outside, and then the connective tissue kind of divides it into kind of sort of sections, if you will. But the thing to note is that in the cortex, you've got the lymph nodules, you got like the lymph sinuses, which are kind of spaces in there, and then you got the diffuse lymphatic tissue, okay? And then you got the lymphatic nodule with a germinal center in the middle, okay? So those are four things that comprise the cortex. So I want you to know the four things that comprise the cortex. The germinal center is got the actively dividing cells and so forth. Okay, so that's why it's called a germinal center. You know, and you know, there are vessels leading towards called the afferent vessels, the lymph node, and then vessels exiting called efferent, right? And taking the blood up to the vascular system. And then the medulla, which is the layer on the inside, only has diffuse lymphatic tissue and lymphatic sinuses, which are kind of like spaces. You see that? It doesn't have these lymph nodules with a germinal center in it. Okay? So sometimes I say, okay, what are the components of the medulla? What are the components of the cortex? So that's what it is. Okay? The cortex is the outside layer, and you know. So there we go. So now the lymphatic tissue, moving on. Lymph nodes, they're kind of like bean shaped, you know. That's what it is. And they're surrounded by fibrous capsule. We said these are the primary lymphoid organs, real organs. The tarsals are kind of diffuse tissue, all right? And then they got this trabeculae, which I was saying divides connective tissue, kind of invaginates into the lymph node, dividing it into sections. That's all compartments, and then those compartments are filled with the lymph nodules, the lymph sinuses, lymphatic sinuses, and the germinal sinuses. All right. So the trabeculae, trabecula means a beam, kind of like a beam. So it's this connective tissue moving in. You see that all this divides it into sort of like sections. So those are the trabeculae leading inside and divides it into the compartments. All the other ones are also like that. The spleen, is like that as well. And then, like I said, the histology is distinct, like with the cortex, which is the lymph nodules, the diffuse lymphatic tissue, right, and then the lymph sinuses, which are kind of like spaces in there, and then the germinal center, of course, in the middle. All right, and then all the diffuse lymphatic tissue and lymph nodules are found in the medulla, which is the second layer, right? So just know the composition of each of those layers of the lymph nodes, all right? Okay, so your lymph nodes, you have the cortex, all right? With follicles, the germinal follicles, I was saying, the centers of heavily dividing B cells, okay? The B lymphocytes, so that's why they have a germinal center. So the germinal center, and then a lymph nodule, and then of course the diffuse lymphatic tissue, the lymphatic sinuses as well. All right? And then in there, remember the dendritic cells I was talking about, which I was saying they can also be antigen-presenting cells. So they kind of sort of encapsulate these follicles. You see what I'm saying? So you have the lymph nodule like that, right? Diffuse lymphatic tissue, and then the dendritic cells are kind of like star-shaped. They're kind of like this. They kind of sort of, they look like a star shape of some sort with many sort of tentacles, like dendritic cells are like that. So those dendritic cells kind of sort of circulate in this, encapsulated. Okay? And dendritic cells, they are also immune cells that will present antigens to the and activate the immune system. So they are antigen-presenting cells, APCs. They are antigen-presenting cells. Right. So that's what kind of encapsulates those follicles with heavily dividing B cells in the germinal center, right, of that lymph nodule. And then because the T cells also circulate throughout. The T cells, the bonds, and I'll show you at the end the overall, circulations of lymph and the T cells and B cells. With the B cells maturing in bone and then exiting and then staying in these lymphatic organs. The T cells will exit, go to the thymus, okay, after they originate from the red bone marrow, and then they will mature in the thymus. And the thymus secretes certain hormones that we'll talk about in a little bit, that will mature the T cells, and then the T cells will come back and circulate throughout all the lymph nodes and lymphatic tissue, okay, after they mature in there, right? What's that? You good? So the deep cortex, of course, houses the T cells in transit because of the going to the thymus, mature there, come back, and then set up camp in these lymph nodes. Because the lymph nodes are the primary T. All right. So now we move to the spleen. The spleen is kind of like strange. It's in this sort of superior left quadrant. Okay, kind of sort of like the left hypogastric region. Okay, so up here. Right? Okay, in the superior left side of the abdomen. Okay, you can look at the quadrants. The division of the in your book in the first chapter. You'll see that, and you can see where the spleen is located. Right, it's kind of right there. And when we dissect in fact, it's part of the digestive system because when it's not part of the digestive system. I'm just saying that when we look at the digestive system, we also look at the spleen, and it will be one of the organs we include, although it's part of the lymphatic system. You know what I'm saying? But because we see it right there in the abdominal cavity, on the upper left side, we include it as part of the organs you have to identify with the digestive. Okay, but it's not the digestive system. So anyway,
how big is it?
It's pretty big. You see it in the cafe.
Golf ball size? Or?
Oh, it's bigger than that. Yeah, it's bigger. Well, it's kind of flat and long, and kind of like thin and long. So in the human, it's good size. It has the function of storing blood as well.
Doesn't it kind of look like a mini liver?
Yeah, it's like a mini liver. Exactly. So the thing about it is that the white pulp and the red pulp. Okay, so the white pulp contains mostly the white blood cells, the lymphocytes suspended on reticular fibers. Okay, again, those reticular fibers, I said, they kind of hold the tissue so that it has a definite shape, so that it doesn't just crumble up on itself. And of course, they're involved in immune function. And the white pulp is involved with capillaries. Okay, white, red, involved with capillaries. And then the red pulp.
White and red are involved with capillaries?
Yes, with the capillaries. You know how we code capillaries red because they're bringing in oxygenated blood. So it's kind of like opposite here. That's why I'm trying to make you see. The white pulp is where once you get the splenic artery comes in, and then the branches of the splenic artery coming in, and then when the splenic artery splits into the arteriole and then the capillaries, it first meets the white pulp, and it's the capillaries. So it's the red capillaries coming into there, is associated with the white pulp, and then the red pulp is associated with the blue veins. Okay, I just wanted you to see this kind of sort of opposite intuitively. Okay, the red pulp is associated with the veins. Okay, and I'll show you the flow of blood through the spleen, which I want you to know for the exam, okay? How it flows through and how the blood is filtered when it enters the spleen, okay? So this is associated, the white pulp is associated with capillaries and the diffuse lymphatic tissue, and the red pulp is got all those reticular cells, reticular fibers associated with the veins. And the red pulp is involved in, destroying worn-out red blood cells as well. And blood-borne pathogens. So, like I was saying, the spleen is semi-reservoir for blood. Okay. Another big reservoir for blood, apart from the veins, is the liver. You store blood in there too. Okay. That's why the liver is so rare. You kill an animal and you take the liver. It's kind of liver. So, the spleen is a little reservoir for. So this is what I said that you need to know about, which is flow of blood through. So it's coming down the aorta, and then the splenic artery splits from the aorta, right? And then there will be branches of the splenic artery. So those branches of the splenic artery are coming in. Okay, this is a branch of the splenic artery. You see how it gets into the white pulp. Okay. And then that branch will then split into an arteriole, right? We're getting smaller and smaller. And then the arteriole splits into the capillaries, which will be spread throughout see, that's the number 2. So as the blood is coming in through the branch of the splenic artery, it is surrounded by diffuse lymphatic tissue. Do you see that? Again, it's being guarded right here. It's being guarded by the diffuse lymphatic tissue. It's got all these lymphocytes in it, right? So the blood is guarded by that. As it's coming through the branch splits into an arteriole, which then enters the white pulp here. You see what I'm saying? And then it enters a lymphatic nodule. Remember, the nodules is a bunch of diffuse lymphatic tissue, kind of sort of in a circular way. So the arteriole enters a nodule, and then once it enters a nodule, it will split into capillaries. Okay? And then it's going to be 3-4 different ways that the blood is going to move through those capillaries. Okay, they are in the red pulp, which has got the blue veins and so forth. The red pulp has got these reticular cells that make reticular fibers. All right, and in it, you've got these big venules, really called they're called the sinuses, venous sinuses, okay? These are the venous sinuses. And they got these slits on them, these huge slits on them. They're kind of extended venules, and they've got slits on them. All right. So some of those capillaries will directly connect to those venous sinuses. All right. Directly connect to those venous sinuses. So that's number 3. Some of them will sort of have a gap between them. You see, it doesn't actually touch, and then it will just diffuse through. Blood just diffuses through to the venous sinus, because the venous sinus is connected to the branch of the splenic vein going back. Okay? And some of them, capillaries, they empty way into the splenic cord. The splenic cord is pretty much reticular cells with those reticular fibers I was talking about. And with it will be those white blood cells, lymphocytes and so forth waiting in there. And then it will just diffuse through the splenic cord, get filtered, and then it enters the venous sinuses.
Off to the vein.
Yeah, and then off to the vein. Okay? Okay? And then number 6, once it enters the venous sinus is connected to the branch of the vein. Okay, so you see what's happening? The branch of the artery is coming in, and it's surrounded by diffuse lymphatic tissue. All right, and then the branch will split into an arteriole, right, which then enters a lymph nodule. Okay, and then once it does that, it will split into capillaries, and then it will go through all the tissues in 3 different ways. Right, the first one is direct connection to the venous sinuses, and the second is there's a slight gap and the blood just diffuses through to get into the venous sinus. And the other one is deposited into the splenic cord. Okay, the splenic cord is diffuse. There's lymphoid tissue there, but it's reticular cells that make reticular fibers to kind of sort of maintain the shape of and to give form to the spleen, so that it's not just crumpled up on itself. And then once it enters the splenic cord here, it will then just diffuse into the venous sinuses. And then number 6, the last step is go to the splenic, the branch of the splenic vein. So in the exam, I really need you to be able to trace the blood flow through the red pulp first, and then through the venous, and then through the white pulp, and then the red pulp, and then back to the venous system. All right. Okay, good. And this is the spleen. You were asking about the size. You see how it's kind of hidden back here too, and then the liver is kind of on this side. All right. So it's pretty big. It's so because there's an antral cadaver, and you can see the kidneys over there, and then the veins and so on. Okay. So the thymus is our last organ. It's a bilobed organ. Kind of looks like this. Okay, and then it's got lobules inside like that. It makes 2 hormones, thymosin and thymopoietin. Okay, thymopoietin will cause the red bone marrow to produce a lot of these precursor cells for the T cells. Okay, and then thymosin will cause the T cells to mature once they're in the thymus. So it produces 2 hormones. So it's part of the endocrine system. Remember, it's part of the endocrine system. So produces these hormones, and it makes the T cells immunocompetent, or mature cells, so that can actually function in the immune system. All right. Size of the thymus varies with age. Like I said, in an infant is much bigger, because an infant is still naive to all these bacteria and all these microorganisms. So they have a large, very large thymus. And then as you get older, it atrophies, and then it basically gets replaced by fat. Okay, so in the infants, it's found in the inferior neck, and it kind of goes over the heart as well. It kind of extends to the mediastinum in the middle of the sternum, then partially overlies the heart. It increases in size, and today when we dissect the cat, we'll be able to see the thymus. It will be kind of right on top of the heart area there, and it will be small. It increases in size in the young children, into childhood, and then as you get older, and then it starts to slowly become replaced by fat. Okay, it gets atrophies. In your 60s, it's mostly fat, and it goes up. So there's the thymus. See, bilobed, and kind of sort of appears like that. And that's the kind of same appearance that you will see in the cat. You have to be careful when we dissect. You may not see it. You might peel it off with some of the other tissue when you remove the thoracic cavity. And I'll show you. I'll kind of cut mine first when I do the dissection, and then you know, after you skin, and then I'll do mine, and then you see how to do it, because I want you to preserve the arteries. So the thymus continues, like I was saying, it differs from other lymphoid organs in important ways. Strictly T lymphocyte, you know, maturation here, and it does not fight organisms directly. What does it do? It simply produces the cells that do the fighting. See what I'm saying? Yeah, it produces the army, if you will. It breeds the soldiers that will do the job. But itself, it doesn't actually fight microorganisms. They will migrate elsewhere to the lymph nodes and so forth to deal with it. Okay, so the stroma of this consists of, star-shaped, the reticular cells again, because the reticular cells, they create what? Reticular fibers, which kind of hold it up. And it is the thymocytes, which secrete the hormones, the thymosin, which and the thymopoietin, which stimulates them to become immunocompetent, those T cells. So that means immunocompetent mature T cells, right? So there's two hormones, thymosins and thymopoietin, is involved in maturation of the T cells, thymosis, hence that's why they're called T cells. And you can see here the thymus kind of over the heart with some lymph nodes and so forth, and diffuse lymphatic nodules and whatnot. And you see how also it's divided into the cortex on the outside and the kind of like the medulla, which is the lighter part, and also the connective tissue kind of divides it into lobules, the trabecula. And this is what I was talking about, where you have the fluid is filtered first, and then it goes through the lymphatic capillaries, which goes to the lymphatic vessels. It's filtered by the lymph nodes, all right? Many of them, 450 of them to be exact. And then it goes into the thoracic duct and the right lymphatic duct, and then the right lymphatic duct and the right thoracic duct empty into the subclavian, all right? This is the cisterna chyli and the thoracic duct, right? And then this collects from the intestines, okay, goes up, okay, with the fat and everything. And then, of course, the spleen will also filter the blood, goes through all those lymphosplenic cords and whatnot, and the venous sinuses, and the white pulp goes back into circulation through the splenic veins and so forth. And here you see how all the B and T cells originate in bone. The B cells will mature in bone, live as B cells, and then the T cells will live as pre-T cells, which then go to the thymus. They become converted to T cells. And then that's why this is not doing any fighting, it's just producing the T cells, which when they go to blood, they'll come back and circulate in lymphatic tissues and so forth and so forth. Right? So that's kind of like the whole lymphatic system in a nutshell. Thank you guys. I'll give you 5 for the lab, okay guys? And we'll start at 5 past. Yeah. Thank you so much guys.